Not yet. Okay, there we go. Just want to click here. Do it. All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another StreamYard Live. We can't even say Facebook anymore because we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we are everywhere at the same time. So I would like to welcome our guest, Keri Strachan. She is a low-carb dietitian. So today we will have a fantastic chat about salt, hypertension, and the low-carb lifestyle. So for everyone that is new to our live, please don't hesitate. Just throw your comments, your questions in the comment section, and we are very happy to answer whatever we can in the next few minutes that we have on this live today, talking about all the interesting myths that people have regarding salt and hypertension. I'm also want to just tell you a little bit about Keri. Right, so Keri is a registered dietitian with 20 years of experience. Her BC in dietic was at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, her master's from Stellenbosch University, as well as several other advanced training qualifications in order to keep up with her breast and the changes of this lifestyle that we've got and nutrition. This training, as well as her personal experience of a cancer diagnosis 4 years ago, has contributed to her developing a special focus on metabolic health. You see, I told you, Keri, I'm going to start off reading. Practically, the role of a therapeutic carbohydrate restriction in managing and even reversing chronic lifestyle diseases like insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and all chronic diseases of lifestyle. So, Keri, tell us a little bit more about yourself that I did not know, just went blah, 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 blah.
Well, I have actually been part of this low carb world since it was Noakes who in 2012 posted that infamous, or rather in my famous article in the Discovery Health magazine, Against the Grain, where he first started talking about his revolution around carbohydrates. And I remember it so clearly because it really just turned me upside down. And I remember several conversations with a really good friend of mine, Corin Heath, who, we would go, how do we understand this? And it was back in the day when Noakes wasn't inundated with all this emails and communication. And he very generously responded to an email when I emailed him to say, please help me understand. And that, as they say, is really all history now, because that was when my career path changed. With the reading that he sent me, I started diving in. And, it's shocking when you suddenly see things a certain way, you can't unlearn it. And it took me a little while before I gained confidence to actually start embarking on low carb in my practice. But I have to say, hands down, it provided me with tools that I was never able to assist my clients with previous to that. And for the first time ever, was really able to make huge change in people's lives. So I am immensely grateful to Prof. Noakes, and I'm so pleased that his journey has turned out to be such a positive one, and he's able to make such a huge impact in South Africa and the world.
Yeah, no, he is absolutely, like I said, fantastic. This morning I had a quick conversation with him, and we love us a piece of Karen. Karen is our senior researcher at the Noakes Foundation, and she's absolutely fantastic. So, Keri, let's just dive right into it. So this week we have Salt Week, and all the myths regarding salt, low carb, even the normal in people with normal diets, or I wouldn't say normal, but the standard traditional diet. People are still scared of salt. What is your feel around this topic?
Yeah, and sadly, it's sort of mirrored in many fields within the nutrition field. It's just been dogma. It's just been what's been promoted for as long as we can remember. Um, but again, this sort of real food revolution that Noakes started really has turned all of that on its head. And it's so much more than what we originally thought. And obviously, because we're learning, every year, the field of nutrition is growing. Um, and it's really interesting because these days we see things from a different perspective where we start recognizing that we need to address the root cause of these problems rather than just dealing with the symptoms, which, salt is definitely connected to blood pressure, but it's not the root cause of it. And so what's really powerful is if we can assist people with change to lifestyle, because of course, blood pressure is one of these conditions of lifestyle. And so therefore we need to address lifestyle. Just addressing diet and medication is not the full picture. And our understanding of blood pressure these days is that if we look at root cause, it's inflammation. And so what causes inflammation? Gosh, so many things. But from a dietary perspective, it's the processed nature of the foods that we eat, which not only is high in salt, but in fact, what seems to be more of a culprit is the high fructose cornstarch specifically. So it's like a fructose on steroids form of carbohydrate available in so many processed foods, which triggers a cascade of events that can contribute towards the development of blood pressure, namely insulin resistance. And so hence the connection to low carb is so effective. And my advice would be that, if people are carb tolerant, in other words, they don't have a raised insulin or aren't seen to be insulin resistant, they can probably follow a more conservative Mediterranean diet where there are still carbohydrate rich foods available. But as soon as insulin levels start to become a problem, and certainly if there is diabetes of any kind, carbohydrates absolutely have to be reduced. Otherwise, you're not going to maximize the benefits of dietary intervention.
Oh, fantastic. So, also on the salt subject, I know we have a lot of followers that are very high performance athletes regarding sport and training. How would salt affect their low carb lifestyle as well, with including their high performance training or their running or all those fantastic things that they do?
Yes, and one of my interests is sports nutrition, and I see it even today, despite people having access to all sorts of information, lots of people thinking it's healthier to restrict their salt intake. And then obviously cramps is an obvious one that people struggle with, but also just fatigue and really not performing at their best. And so in many cases, most people, especially if you're eating a real food diet, there is definitely capacity to add salt to your food. Obviously, if the blood pressure is an issue, then I would recommend just adding it after cooking so that you can control exactly how much goes in your food. But generally speaking, when you are an athlete, and particularly if you lose a lot of sweat in the nature of your exercise, you are losing salt. And so it's important to replace that salt.
Oh, fantastic. So we're just going to drop into the comments. Just please remember, please, guys, if you have any questions, we are here. We are on the line. We are ready for anything you would like to know. We just want to say hello to Joanna. Joanna said she's very looking forward to this discussion. Eliane Alexander is all the way from Germany. So we'd just like to say thank you for being on our live. And then please, you guys can leave your questions in the comments and we will be happy to share it. Keri, so on the 17th of May, we have National Hypertension Day. Can you give us a layman's explanation of hypertension for those people that are new to the term or don't understand it, or somebody doctor said you have hypertension now? What would that be?
So, hypertension is when your blood vessels don't respond as they should to an increase in blood pressure. blood volume, and it increases the pressure within the blood vessels. And the knock-on effect is to other organs within the body, such as the kidneys, the eyes, and other organs, the heart. And so it's very important and that is often why it's called the silent killer, because it can often go with very little symptoms, and a fairly small increase in blood pressure can have fairly significant impact. So a healthy blood pressure would be 120 over 80, but not much more than that can lead to implications in either of those areas.
Oh, fantastic. And then again, the very controversial question would be salt and hypertension. So any thoughts on that fantastic comment that always comes together? I can't have salt because I've got high blood pressure.
Yes. And so I think, a lot of the previous studies looking at that and showing that by reducing salt intake improves your blood pressure was often involved removing processed foods from the diet, because we know that processed foods are a source of higher salt, much more than naturally formed foods. But what was missed was that those foods are often also high in refined carbohydrates. And so salt definitely in those sort of levels will impact blood pressure. But what we know now is that those refined carbohydrates, as well as hidden vegetable fats or man-made fats within those processed foods, contribute to inflammation, which is the main driver, as well as insulin resistance. And so the best way to remove excess salt from the diet is to return to real food. And a good baseline would be a Mediterranean style diet with lots of plant vegetables and a variety of plants, so that you're getting sufficient minerals such as your magnesium and potassium, which play an important role in balancing blood pressure, but also fiber, which has a role in our health and can improve things like insulin resistance too.
Oh, fantastic. So our comments have grown on the other side. So we have Johannes Peters from the USA. Hello, Johannes. And then Liana said, I am in the UK. I have low blood pressure and follow a keto diet. I've recently been feeling very tired. Is adding more salt to my diet something that would help? And then she also just here at the bottom said that her blood pressure is generally 100 over 60.
Yes. And so what happens when you adapt to a low carbohydrate diet is that you increase the amount of sodium that our kidneys release. And so if your blood pressure was already naturally low, being on a low carb or keto is likely to push it even lower. And so you are one of those candidates who can probably fairly generously add salt to your diet. A good salt would be a Himalayan or something similar, which has a nice rich mineral content to it, rather than an iodized salt.
Oh, fantastic. Johanna also had a question for us here. Johanna's question is, how does stress influence the potential cause of high blood pressure? I've seen healthy people develop high blood pressure from stressful environments.
Stress is a really interesting one. And that's why in the beginning I made a mention about the role of lifestyle, because I'm of the opinion, and you mentioned my cancer journey, I'm of the opinion that unless we address our whole lifestyle, we're not going to get on top of these conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, etc. Gosh, you might have to remind me of the question. My menopause brain has attacked me.
About stress influences potentially
Stress,
into
thank you.
Yes.
So stress is going to trigger your sympathetic nervous system, which is going to, if you think about what our sympathetic nervous system is, it's the fight or flight, it's the response to a very stressful event. Your adrenaline is going to be released. And remember, if you have to run away from a tiger, you need your body to be able to perform the most amazing feat. But what's happening in our modern world is that we've got this chronic level of stress almost permanently, and so we are almost stuck in this sympathetic nervous system, and that directly increases our blood pressure. So a very important add on to diet. We're focusing specifically on diet today, but lifestyle factors that help to moderate stress, because Maritza, we just can't get away from stress these days, and so we actually have to balance our lifestyles around our stressful lives. So things like getting enough sleep, getting enough sunshine, being outdoors, being grounded on bare feet outside, maybe yoga and breath work, and definitely making sure you're getting enough sleep. Stress absolutely has to be managed, because it does. It changes your chemistry. It increases your inflammatory markers, and can immediately contribute to other chronic diseases of lifestyle. And blood pressure is usually very seldom just on its own as a condition that people struggle with. There's usually many other conditions of metabolic syndrome, for example, that people have.
Oh, fantastic. So talking about premenopause and menopause, how does that affect somebody that's been on a low carb eating plan, maybe not having enough salt, maybe not having enough fat? How do they have to change their approach towards it when it comes to premenopause and menopause? Us young ladies now turning older.
Well, it's interesting. So my cancer journey obviously threw me into menopause, although I'm 49 now, so it's probably not unusual that I would be going through it. But it was a bit of a shock to me, and it's frustrating how menopause is not adequately, in my opinion, given credit and enough attention. And so it feels like you're going through it on your own. So my sort of research, and I'm certainly not an expert on it, but as women get older, people will recognize that we start gathering weight centrally, and in fact, it's one of the prime reasons why women, as they get older, start surpassing men in their cardiovascular risk. And it's all to do with our metabolic changes. As we lose estrogen, we actually become insulin resistant. We also increase, as you lose estrogen, our cortisol levels increase. So menopausal women, you are already in a state of chronic stress before you even get out of bed in the morning. And so managing stress in menopause is a very real issue. And so because of those things, and especially because of the insulin resistance, as you approach menopause and as you get into it, adjusting your carbohydrate load is very important to prevent that central weight gain to contribute to other chronic diseases, and obviously to improve all symptoms. In menopause these days, everyone's got hot flashes and has insomnia, and really the reading that I do suggests if we can improve our lifestyle and make better choices, we shouldn't have all these symptoms. And so it's about getting enough sleep, adapting to a real food diet, reducing those carbohydrate loads, getting enough fiber through good plant content in the diet, and healthy fats, so that you're getting your energy levels from foods that aren't going to impact your insulin levels, and helping to curb any cravings or snacking habits which drive those insulin levels. Intermittent fasting for women is a really useful strategy, along with a reduced carb approach, which can become a lifestyle. And, I think that's the key with all of these things. It has to be a lifestyle. It's not a short-term diet or quick fix solution. It has to be a long-term plan.
Oh, fantastic. So from our side here, we've got Louis from Colombo. He goes, Buenos dias. And then Leonie said, thank you for the advice with the low blood pressure. So again, I'm saying whoever is watching us, you are very welcome to drop us a comment or a question in the comments, and then we will just ask it here on the screen. So Keri, I am now thinking of doing low carb, and I'm now coming to see you for the first time while we have you on the line, if you can give us a little bit of background regarding the low carb lifestyle and even fasting, because that's one thing people think they understand the fasting concept, but sometimes it doesn't work out as they thought they knew. And then also it affects the blood pressure and it affects the salt levels, and all their metabolic system is running haywire because they think they're fasting correctly, and then the fasting is not even in place.
Mm. I think the biggest challenge that people have is that they come from a sort of history of diets. And so there's almost this impression that in order to lose weight or be healthy, you have to feel like you're on a diet and it's okay to be hungry and you've got to push through. Whereas when you're adopting a low carb diet, it's really important to still nurture your body and fuel your body. And some people adapt very well to a super strict approach where they just cut carbs out and then fuss bait through that initial period of waiting for their body to become fat adapted. So, when you first take carbohydrates out, your body isn't going to know any different. It's only going to be looking for carbs. And so people can often feel quite terrible in those early few days, lacking energy, fatigue, moody, headaches, and that can often make them feel that this is not right for them. But with the right guidance and drinking enough fluid, replacing salt, usually after about 2 weeks, they start to sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel. And the real benefits come from when they get fat adapted. And that's when your body starts realizing that there are these energy supplies within the body that it can tap into. And once you are fat adapted, extending the periods of not eating, in other words, creating a longer fasting period, becomes much easier. And so that's why I say some people find it easier to just dive straight in, but others need a more conservative approach and maybe tapering off their carbohydrates. And as they get more and more confident that they can last longer without snacking or eating, for some people, skipping breakfast, especially if they exercise in the morning, seems like totally unrealistic. But until they've experienced what it feels like to be fat adapted, they really can't know. And so I think it's important to work with the person for where they're at and what they believe they're capable of. They've got to get to a point where, firstly, they've got enough information, but they are also confident enough that they can do it. And then, so everybody's different in terms of what suits them. Because it needs to be a lifestyle, I would always work with somebody and work out what their daily demands are. If somebody is fairly flexible in their day and they can eat breakfast at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, then we can work with that. But not everybody has that luxury. And some people might find that fasting doesn't work because they have to eat breakfast in the morning. So there's many ways of doing it, but the typical is like an 8-16. So you've got an 8-hour window period. So if you ate your first meal at 11 and then had dinner at 7, that would be perfect. And then so from dinner, you don't eat anything until 11 o'clock the next day. Obviously, drinking fluids would be fine during that time. And it's that fasting period for people who have insulin resistance that is incredibly effective at bringing that insulin level down, which will reduce that sodium retention, which can drive blood pressure. A lot of people in the very first couple of weeks shed weight, and a lot of that can be mostly water weight. But usually adapting to a low carb, blood pressure is one of the first things to improve. And they'll often experience symptoms of dizziness from sitting to standing up. And that's usually a sign that they can start chatting to their doctor about reducing their blood pressure medication. But, there should be a sense of not being hungry. And I think that's was the point I was trying to make in the very beginning, is that people are not familiar with the sense of actually being quite comfortable and eating not according to what your dietitian says, how many matchboxes or how much of your plate you must eat. You must actually eat to be satisfied. and it must be protein loaded, and you can cook with generous amounts of fat, healthy, real food fats, of course. Because when you eat like that, you don't get hungry. And then you're not on this crazy carb roller coaster of craving sugars and just waiting for the next sort of kick to keep your energy levels up.
Fantastic. Absolutely. So Lebogang said, this is very informative and well explained. Blue Saint has asked, what do you know? What would like to know your thoughts on coffee, especially decaf coffee on a carnivore diet? Any thoughts?
Gosh, I don't think I've got much to comment on there. I must say I'm a bit of a coffee fan, so I am not terribly excited about the idea of a decaf. But I would rather go for the good old, real, freshly ground beans for the wonderful antioxidants that it can provide. Um, my caution with coffee, and I see it quite a lot with my clients, so I don't know if I'm digressing from the question, but um, is people turning to coffee as an energy boost. My first comment would be, let's rather address your diet. And certainly if you are eating carnivore, you shouldn't have any energy issues. So, and obviously, if you're taking decaf, you're hopefully not doing it for the energy boost, but rather get that through your diet and healthy fats. But I mean, I think on a carnivore diet, if you are having a bit of decaf, certainly wouldn't see any issue with that. Presumably, you would be having it either black or with cream or coconut oil or something like that. And so it can replenish hydration, provided you're not having too much of the caffeinated coffee. So there's definitely a place for it as one of your fluids.
Oh, fantastic. So another question would be, does coffee work on, can coffee cause hypertension?
Yes, so too much definitely can. And some people are more sensitive to caffeine than others. Your genetic testing would help you with that. But I think, some people, if you are a habitual coffee drinker, you're less likely to notice it. And it would be interesting, I guess, to do a bit of a detox and go without it and work out how addicted, I guess, your body is. And from time to time, it's probably a good idea to do that. But certainly, if you've got a high blood pressure, I would caution people about having more than sort of 2 to 3 cups. And if it's an instant coffee, it's going to have less caffeine, and so have less of an impact than a freshly ground. So those would be considerations.
Oh, interesting. I must say, I haven't had coffee in a few days and I'm feeling a little twitchy. Also, interesting question that I also got now was, is there a possibility to have too much salt? Is there a way bridge where we go and then somebody's having too much salt? How would you know if you're having too much salt?
Yes, definitely. Too much salt can be an issue. I don't know immediately offhand what would be your symptoms, I guess. I suppose you could start retaining fluid, but I don't know about that. But, it would be quite difficult to achieve, I would imagine, if you are eating a more real food diet versus a processed food. And so I think that's probably fairly rare. But your athletes, for example, who take salt tablets to prevent cramp, there is definitely a risk of that. And salt is balanced so delicately that it can be an issue. I don't know. Dr. Noakes would probably have a wonderful explanation to explain what the dangers would be. But I mean, just the taste of it would put you off. You would immediately get very thirsty. So I feel like naturally we would prevent ourselves, unless it's through those artificial and processed food sources where I think it could be easily done.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with some slap chips, you can definitely have an overdose
Yes.
in
Yes.
salt. So Karen Heath asked you, can anything help with low blood pressure?
Yes. So, low blood pressure, keeping your hydration up, and adding salt at meals would be the most effective way of improving your blood pressure. Being active, keeping your heart nice and strong, would be another way to monitor your blood pressure. And of course, keeping active also does the opposite and helps to reduce a high blood pressure. But literally adding salt to your food, either in cooking or at the table. Remember, if you are losing salt during exercise, you should probably be more proactive in that. I would usually get my athletes to monitor their change in weight around exercise to assist them with that. Or if you notice after exercise, if you've got sort of salty crystals, then you know you're a high salt sweater. And so you would need to increase your salt in your diet a little bit more than that. Trying to think if there was something else. Yeah, I think those are probably the main points.
Oh, fantastic. So from our side, Keri, I think there's no more questions. We are, I think our salt and hypertension was quite interesting. Any final thoughts from your side regarding the week that we are now doing awareness on regarding salt and hypertension and the low carb diet, or not diet, lifestyle? How does all of this come together in making the harmonious lifestyle that we all should be adapting to keep ourselves ready and steady?
So I believe that in many ways in this modern world, we have lost connection with ourselves and our bodies. I think our bodies have a natural, intuitive wisdom that we need to tap into and start listening to the signals that our bodies give us. And it involves actually really simple lifestyle changes that fortunately don't cost anything. It just requires practice and effort, and start with small steps. So if we're talking specifically blood pressure, my advice would be to start eliminating processed foods, start incorporating more plant-based foods, cook from scratch, use herbs, and add salt in cooking, but avoid pre-made sauces or powdered packets that you add to your food. Herbs and natural spices add antioxidants and phytochemicals, which are anti-inflammatory, and you can control how much salt is going in your food. And so it's really simple things, including a healthy lifestyle, keeping active, managing stress, getting enough sleep. It's actually all the stuff that we used to do before we got so busy with our busy lives. So we do need to try and slow things down and remember the simple things.
Oh, fantastic. So while you were talking, quick, we had two more questions that popped up on the side here. So Caroline asked, carnivore encourages you to take additional iodine. I find it tires me, so I have stopped taking it. Why, she asked, why does it make her tired?
I don't know. I'm afraid I'm unable to answer that question, but maybe you could get Noakes to, or one of your team to respond to that. Corin Heath
Definitely.
can look it up
There you go,
and give us a wonderful response.
And then from Lebogang, they asked, what is your opinion on genetic testing, which determines salt sensitivity in relation to blood pressure?
Yes, so a bit like caffeine, there are genetic SNPs that indicate whether you are salt sensitive or not. And so people who demonstrate those SNPs, it would be prudent to follow a more salt controlled diet. But again, I would argue that sticking to a Mediterranean real food approach is safe across the board, and you're very unlikely to overdo salt in that way.
Oh, fantastic. Keri, I just want to say thank you from our side. I think this was a very enlightened conversation. It was on very short notice. I just wanted everybody to know Keri is a team player. We asked her yesterday. She said she's here. She gave us fantastic information regarding our salt, hypertension, lifestyle. So just a few things from the Noakes Foundation. Tomorrow we are launching something spectacular. Do not miss out. Go check on all our social medias. It's going to be fantastic. And The other one I would like to ask you guys to do is also have a look at our Patreon page. Our Patreon page is where we have continuous research going. Supporting us there will assist us to do the work that we do currently, to give the answers that everybody requires, and to support the communities where necessary. Again, Keri, I would like to say thank you so much. Thank you to all our viewers. Thank you for having us here. Thank you for the short notice. Thank you for all the fantastic questions. Just a reminder, Prof's Live would be the last Thursday of this month. Do not miss out. And that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you,
Thanks,
Keri.
Maritza. Cheers.